One other little bit of news. There's a great piece over at Huffington Post today, about money in politics. The Dark Act, by the way, passed the House of Representatives. We were not successful in stopping it. Debbie Stabenow was very successful in getting it through the Senate, with presumably lots of Monsanto money. And I don't know who was leading the charge in the House, but it would have been, Paul Ryan allowed it to come up for a vote. So ultimately it was his decision. And so Paul Ryan, led the charge in the House. And here we've got this piece of legislation, this crappy piece of legislation, which is going to preempt Vermont's GMO labeling law and basically say to Vermont, there's this 10th Amendment thing that, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with the 10th Amendment, the 10th Amendment says the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or prohibited to it by the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people, right? In other words, states' rights. And Republicans always used to be all about states' rights when that meant that the state can choose to, have literacy tests to vote, or can have, all the old Jim Crow laws can prevent people, African Americans, from sitting at lunch counters or shopping in particular places or using public facilities, bathrooms and whatnot. The Republicans were all in favor of states' rights. In 1980, when Ronald Reagan gave his very first speech of his official presidential campaign down near Philadelphia, Mississippi, where Schwimmer and Goodman and Cheney were murdered. The essence of his speech was states' rights. And what that meant was, letting states discriminate. But if a state wants to do something for its people that its people actually want, as Vermont did over a 2-year period, holding these hearings about GMO labeling, the Republicans don't give a damn about states' rights. This law preempts Vermont's law. So sorry, Vermont, you passed a law for your people, but, ain't going to be. So now the last place that we can stop it is to convince the President of the United States to stop it. If you go over to whitehouse.gov, you can sign the petition to stop the Dark Act, to veto the Dark Act. He could veto it. And it would not, it passed with 63 votes. That's not enough to override a veto. It takes 66 votes to override a veto in the Senate, if my recollection is correct. And it would take 2/3 in the House, too, I think. And that ain't going to happen. So right now, the last barrier we have to knowing, to knowing what's in our food is President Obama. So we have to, shout out to President Obama. The White House comment line, by the way, is 202-456-1111. If you want to call the White House and say, please tell the president to veto the Dark Act, this so-called GMO Labeling Act. They don't call it the Dark Act. Activists call it the Dark Act, as in keep Americans in the dark. But they call it something else. They call it, we are now labeling GMO, the national standards for GMO labeling or something. Yeah, the national standard is we're going to put a little black barcode kind of box called a QR code that nobody can read, and you can't figure out what the hell's in your food. So the last stop for this thing is President Obama. 202-456-1111, or perhaps more importantly, go to whitehouse.gov and sign the petition to say, veto the Dark Act, veto this. Now, meanwhile, where I started with all this is this piece on the Huffington Post today, and this was let's see who authored this. I don't have the name of an author on this printout, but the article points out that super PACs and nonprofit groups have already spent. Now we're 4 months out from the election, right? August, September, October, November. Yeah, roughly 4 months out, maybe a little more than 4 months out from the election. They've already spent $101 million in states. Now this is just in Senate races. $101 million to determine who's going to control the Senate. It was looking really good for the Democrats. The Republicans are defending twice as many seats as the Democrats are. And there's a very real possibility, very real chance, a very good chance the Democrats could take back the Senate if it wasn't for Citizens United and Buckley versus Vallejo, if it wasn't for all this dark money. Republicans totally dominate this. $70 million of that $101 million total has been spent on behalf of Republican candidates. 1/3 of that, the 2016 Senate total, is just in Ohio, where billionaires, millionaires, multimillionaires, big corporations are throwing money in to support Senator Rob Portman, the current Republican senator from Ohio, who is running against the very popular Democratic Ohio Governor Ted Strickland. And the people really like Strickland. So they've dumped the Republicans have dumped, or the Republican-aligned super PACs and dark money groups have dumped $24 million into this thing. Similar disparities, he notes, in favor of Republicans exist across most of the key Senate races in Arizona, Illinois, Missouri, Nevada, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And by the way, this does not include the money that we don't know about that is being spent by 501c3s that do not have to disclose their donors. And so we know nothing about, I mean, it might be $200, $300, $400 million. They just can't say this is an ad in favor of or against a campaign or a candidate. But they can say this candidate voted for this horrible piece of legislation. Please call this candidate and tell him to quit being an idiot. They can say that. And that's not considered. And they never have to disclose their donors and never have to report the expenditure. By the way, they note in this Huffington Post piece, the top spenders in all of these races are the same. On the Republican side, support comes from groups connected to the billionaire Koch brothers, including Freedom Partners Action Fund, Americans for Prosperity, and Concerned Veterans for America, as well as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and One Nation, a group that Karl Rove and Mitch McConnell.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So this is bad news for our democracy. We'll be back with your calls. Anything Goes Summer here on the Thom Hartmann Program right after.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.